Bang! Neeves Knives. I'm Jared, and we got the Twosun 313 button lock. Now, this is Twosun's first button lock knife, at least as far as I know of. And this happens to be the strongest detent I have ever felt on a button lock. And we're going to get into that in just a moment. First, it is an M390 titanium with micro milling, and you see all the weight relief, but aside from that weight relief, pow, look at the inside of this thing. All that milling. Holy cow, does it got a lot of milling. T8s all the way around. Beautiful full back spacer. And you can see the blue from them, from whatever process they use, which I think actually looks pretty cool. Now, this thing also has a huge stop, or a nice big stop pin, which I think is awesome because the detent is so strong. Pow! Now, another thing I really like about this knife is it has a hollow grind on it. Now, you don't see too many Twosuns. Usually Twosuns do full flat grinds or flat grinds, right? This is a hollow grind. And then it has a dual grind, so it's flat up here and then hollow in the, the flat area right here is hollow. Flat up here, and it's got a nice beautiful upswept swedge. Now let's get into the action, and then we'll get into the cutting and all the other goods and bads about this thing. So big thumb studs, nice big, very grippy thumb studs. They're definitely very large, and they are proud. Now using them, man, strong detent. It is incredibly strong. Now you can always just push the button and let it roll out. It does have multi-row bearings, so just pushing the button, you see how smooth it is. I mean, this thing is 100% fall shut. 100%. There's no stopping that thing from dropping. It does have a decently thick blade stock, so that it's going to add to the weight to the blade for the drop. But all you got to do is just hit that button and it swings shut fast. I can reverse flick it, but it does take some pressure because, like I said, it is, you can see my finger right there, because it does have a very strong detent. Now, how does that work? Because technically this doesn't have a detent. So it has a spring inside here. That's why this is milled out on this side to hold the spring pocket. Now you see right here where that plunges, that is the lock. So when it comes open, it springs into place there. Now this thing is as solid as a knife can get. I mean, this thing is super duper solid, which is really nice because it's a button lock. And the strength from the spring is so strong, pushing, into the lock position, that I have no doubt this thing's not going to hold strong for a very long time. Especially since starting off, it has no play whatsoever in the open direction, or, while it's open. So it does have a very, very strong lockup, and the detent, like I said, is very strong. Now it has a little pocket inside there where you have to break that and basically compress the spring to pop it out. See how it drops in there? So once you break the detent, because it's on multi-row bearings and the bearings are so smooth, it just flies out. And you can feel the impact from when it pops open. It really comes out hard. It does have a little bit of lock stick, but I'm not going to call that anything negative. We'll get to the negative here in a little bit. Micro milling all over it, which is beautiful. Nice big button. Now this button is not inset. It is sticking out. And very easy to get to. Cutting performance. So behind the edge thickness of the hollow grind. Okay, so specifically this, or let's go into Ergos first. Sorry. Ergos are really good. It is contoured. So since it is contoured and all the edges are really knocked down and rounded really nice, it's very, very comfortable in the hand. And you also have the opportunity to come up nice and close to the blade if you want to. This grip is comfortable. Not as comfortable as this grip, but it's still relatively comfortable. And you know, even in like the reverse grip, it's pretty decent. You'd want to be careful in the reverse grip because you can hit that button, but in regular grip, I didn't have any issues with the button. My finger usually is like this, and if I'm in the push cut, I'm usually like this, and the button is kind of just like in between. So I didn't have any issues hitting the button by accident or anything like that. It does have jimping on the spine right there for the thumb ramp, and this is a very comfortable position. And since it does have the taper of the spine with the jimping of the back spacer poking out a little bit, it does lock you in really nicely. You know, all my fingers feel like they land in a good place. Relatively comfortable, pretty comfortable. Now, cutting performance. So when talking about the hollow grind right here, it's about 15 thousandths behind the edge, and it cuts pretty doggone good considering it's a nice hollow grind. You know, you would expect that. So it does cut relatively good when slicing. No issues there. You can kind of follow the taper of the, you know, when you're slicing through things, you can kind of angle the blade to where it's always hitting the hollow grind and never going to the front of the blade. And when you do, you can kind of angle it where it goes over it really nicely. And yeah, the slicing is really good. Now, the front of the knife where the flat grind is 30 thousandths behind the edge. So we're talking double the edge thickness that is right here is right here. It is relatively thick. So it is going to be a very strong, durable tip. You're not going to have to worry about breaking that thing. But this tip right here, the secondary tip, is relatively acute. It is more of a Japanese tanto where it's rounded up here and not straight. But it does work for doing light duty utility cuts. Now, if you're trying to actually cut things in half or anything like that, it'll work. You're just going to want to have to put more pressure. Light pressure isn't going to cut things in half. You're going to be able to open things up and, you know, open boxes and packages and stuff like that. But anything thick, it is going to give you some resistance, and you will have to put quite a bit of pressure to get through it, especially if it's dense. Now, the actual tip itself is very strong, but you can get to it. Even though it is slightly upswept, you actually can get to it without losing all the leverage by going straight up. So you can actually get to it, and even though it is about 30 thousandths behind the edge, it winds up working out not too bad for, you know, light duty utility cuts. Like I said, if you want to really get through some dense stuff, though, you are going to have to put some pressure behind your cut. Now, moving to the clip. The clip is a titanium milled clip, and as you can see, all the hardware is T8, which is really nice. But the clip works fantastic. It actually goes all the way over this groove that's in the handle. So since it does go all the way over, nothing really gets trapped in there or anything like that. And it's actually very smooth in and out of the pocket. This is one of Twosun's better clips. I'd actually like to see this clip on some more of their models because it works out pretty good. And this isn't, I mean, this is a little pokey right here, but I don't never really feel it. And I actually don't feel it at all in my hand. So, you know, this is kind of irrelevant if it's pokey because you don't feel it whatsoever. And it's not really that bad. Slightly contoured, so it winds up being very comfortable in the hand. But in and out of the pocket, it works great in and out of the pocket. It does have quite a big ramp, and, you know, it allows you to get thicker stuff underneath it. And it goes over it really nicely. Nice and smooth in and out. Now, I'm going to do some quick size comparisons really quick just to give you an idea of the size. So this is a pretty common or a pretty well-known Twosun, the Twosun TS129. They are about the same length. So if you know the size of this knife, you know the size of this knife. This one is quite a bit beefier, and this one's quite a bit lighter. And then here is Spyderco PM2, and that'll be the last size comparison, but just because most people do know this knife. So the PM2 is a little bit longer, not by much. Now, the thickness is really close to a PM2. It is slightly thicker. You can see it's quite a bit thicker, actually. This thing is pretty beefy. It is pretty stocky. Now, let's talk about some bad things, and then I'm going to talk about what's awesome about it. So, some negative things. One, I don't like this, the writing around the pivot. It's, I just don't like it. I think it's kind of tacky. That's my opinion. Maybe not yours, but it is mine. Next thing, it does have Detent Lash. Now, this isn't really Detent Lash. It is, though, because it's just like Detent Lash, and it's not the spring tension, because the spring tension is extremely strong. Now, what it is the groove of which this uses the detent as is slightly bigger than the actual pin that's being pushed out by the spring. So that pin right there that you see moving right there, groove is slightly larger, so it allows a little bit of play. Now, the next thing is the tip does hang out a little bit, not by much, but I can touch it. Now, I'm going to sharpen that back for the owner, but I wanted to make sure I got it in this video so I could show it before I fixed it. So yeah, it's it's there. You can touch it. Not too big of a deal, but it is there. It's not like it's microscopic thin, so it's not stabbing me or anything. But after I sharpen it, that should hopefully take care of the majority of it. Next thing, the flat grind up here, like I said, 30 thousandths. That's pretty thick. Now, I think they should have went just a little bit thinner up there at the tip. Yeah, this is a robust knife, and it does cut very well and all those things. And I know the tip is going to mainly be used for opening things up, but I just don't consider this a knife that needs that thick of a tip or that robust of a tip. I think it would have benefited it just to make it a little bit thinner. I do, however, love that they did a hollow grind on here. And they did a great job on the sharpening choil/plunge grind. The plunge grind starts here and it ends very, very early. So they gave you a lot of life to sharpen off of this thing. That's amazing. Next thing, now, I'm not going to say this is a horrible thing or anything like that, but when you flip the spring, it will, I think, lock it in place so you won't be able to open it or something like that. The owner, they told me that, when they accidentally put the spring in upside down or something like that, and then you had to push the button to open it, or something like that. Just make sure if you take it apart, you put it back together exactly how it came apart. That's basically all I'm going to say about that. It is off-centered a little bit, not that big of a deal, but it's just slightly off-centered. It isn't rubbing or anything like that. And then, I do like that the detent is very strong. I do like that. But the thumb studs are slightly sharp on top of it. And it's really not that big of a deal because you do get used to it. But the thumb studs are extra big and do have... I normally like sharp thumb studs, so I don't want to make it seem like I dislike it. But some people might think that this is too strong of a detent. Some people. Me, I'm okay with it, so I'm not, saying that that's a bad thing for me. I'm saying it might be a little too strong for you. Just depends on how strong of a detent you like. The thumb studs are very proud, and going in and out of the pocket, there are times where it does kind of snag a little bit. You can see how proud they are. They are extremely proud. Now that helps with flicking the knife out, because you get a lot of pressure, but they are slightly sharp in some little corners, and it's so proud that you get used to it. Putting it in and out of the pocket, I really didn't have an issue, so I'm not really that worried about it, but other people might be. But so, just be cognitive of that it does have big thumb studs, and you won't really have an issue, but it does catch from time to time. Not so much that it waved out of my pocket or anything like that, but I could feel it, putting it in the pocket and out of the pocket sometimes. Now, one other thing that could be an issue for a lot of people is that this button is not recessed at all, and you don't have to push it all the way in and past this point, so you can just hardly push it. And I'm not saying like it's a light push, because you do have to put some tension behind the button, but you could technically bump it and shut it. So most button locks are made where you have to push it beyond a certain point or get your finger inside there. This is proud. So technically I could squeeze it and it drop. Or the opposite way, I could squeeze it this way and it could drop, when that's usually not the case with most button locks. Most button locks, like I said, they put like a safety feature there where you either have to push it really hard all the way in really deep, or it's not proud where you can't bump it. You have to like put your finger in there to really push it. Now this one does have a strong spring, so I'm not saying you're just gonna bump it and it's just gonna release. I mean, it does have some pretty good tension on it. So, but a lot of people might consider that a bad thing. In the pocket, if you bumped the button, you know, that could happen. Or if you're in use and you bump the button, it could disengage. Now, that's really all the real negatives. Let's talk about some more pluses really quick. So it does have a really nice satin finish, and it is unique because this is kind of innovative for Twosun. Now, Twosun, you know, this is their first button lock and they did a hollow grind on it. I think that's amazing. I love seeing Twosun do things like this. So I am impressed with it, and I would love to see them do more, because I think that this is opening up an awesome area for Twosun to innovate and do new things and different things. Now, man, that lockup is so strong. They made a very, very solid knife here, and that's another thing I can very much appreciate. The biggest issue for me is this Detent Lash. Now, that's just this one. I'm not saying if you get one, you will experience that Detent Lash, but it is something, though, to note. All in all, I'm impressed with it. I do think, like I said, I think this is very innovative for Twosun, and I'm excited to see them do more button locks in the future and see where it takes them, because this thing is, you know, it is very well done, but there also is some issues. So I can tell it's their first one, if that makes sense. And being their first one, you know, there's going to be some things that they can always do better, but it's a great way to start it off, if that, you know, hopefully that makes sense. There you guys go. I love you guys. Thank you guys for watching. Cue Ball, thanks again, brother. Peace.